talking all things change management for an hour, and the rules are racy, very much. Let's be open, be honest, respect the opinions, all the good stuff. Let's just be decent human beings, constructive, not destructive. But importantly, be a participant and an observer. Engage. You get out what you get put in type philosophy. So all the good stuff. And the advert is over the next 8 weeks, every second week, I'll be running these a series of sessions. From today, we're in business transformation and change, then strategy, customer value management, management accountability, information, operating productivity, the operating model, productivity, and business outcome management. And it's these sort of second week dates going out to March. But what I've done as a result of this session and some comments I've received, because 8 a.m., as Rachel says, it's crazy hours in Perth. Every other week, I'm putting on the same session again in the evening. So next Monday, I'll run the same session again at 7:30 at night, and then to the first one. So just letting you guys know, and please feel free to attend any or all of those sessions. Watch out for the events coming through on LinkedIn. The philosophy is 5 minutes welcome, which we're already over time. Then 30 minutes of, I'll present you guys for 30 minutes on whatever the topic is, and then a 20-minute discussion and a 5-minute close. Now, I'm not particularly concerned with how that 20 plus 30 plus 20 manifests itself, whether it's interspaced with questions or a block of 30 and a block of 20. And but if you've got a question, if it's really pertinent, I'll hit it. Then I might say, hang on, I'm going to cover this shortly, and we'll delay it. So feel free to engage and work with that. Having said that, today's a particularly packed session, so I'm just going to jump into it and let's go. And Charles, you spoke about frameworks. We're going to hit that quite hard. And Tony, you spoke about people, and yep. We're going to hit that a little bit harder. Not hard. We're going to hit that because the whole thing is about people. What this is not is about technical change. So everything here is people.
That's fine.
And kicking off with that, what is change management? It's the development, execution, and monitoring of a macro change strategy. Now that's important. A macro change strategy and a detailed plan. Those two do work together. And in your language around change, you should be thinking about that sort of language. Do I have a strategy? What's our strategy? Where we're going? What's my plan to get there? It shouldn't just be a plan or a strategy. You should have two, both levers to pull. The key words, a detailed plan that delivers sustained inducement. Coming back to Tony, sustained inducement. You're constantly pushing people to change. And we'll talk about the will, won't, can, can't framework, getting people to say, I will do it and I can do it. That's your nirvana. That's what you're aiming at. I can do it and I will do it. And you can train people that can do it plenty, but will do it, well, it's a horse to water story. So, sustained inducement and compelling them to enlist themselves. For me, that's the most powerful word in change management is the word enlist. And what I mean by that, if you think about the Marines, the classic fighting force, the people that enlist themselves and volunteer to be in the Marines, they've got an attitude of can do, will do, must do. Whereas if you're a conscript, right, and you get told to show up in the army, you've got a very bad attitude. You don't want to be there. You're not engaged. I don't like it. So you want the staff to enlist themselves into the change program rather than conscripting them into the change program. And if you just use those terms and you keep those terms in mind, how do I get people to enlist rather than be conscripted? That again is your nirvana. That's what you're chasing. But at some point you've got to conscript people. The bus is moving type language. We got to go. But until that moment comes, the more you can get people to enlist themselves, the more they want to be part of it, and they will help you drive the change program. So as to drive recognizable and sustainable change, yes, change should be sustainable, and enabling the organization to effectively and efficiently achieve its desired state. So that's part of having the strategy and where you're going. But this whole thing, which you can read in detail, the sustained inducement causing people to enlist themselves, take that away as a soundbite. That's really, really powerful. Where does change fit in? This is not a graphic you'll see in too many change presentations, but I quite like it. It's by Mintzberg. It's about 70 years old. You've got, an organization's got sort of three structures to it. It's got the technostructure, the support staff, and then this strategic apex or operating core. This is operations. This is how you deliver products and services to the customer down through the middle here. This is where you generate revenue. The right-hand side is the support staff, people and culture, quality, legal. These are the support functions that are helping build capabilities in the organization to be able to do that better, right? Making sure that people are onboarded and that sort of thing. And on the other side, you've got the technostructure. These are your technocrats that are working on the business, trying to make the business better, sharper, stronger, and working in conjunction with the other two functions. So change and transformation sits inside the technostructure. The key point is it's not in the operating core. That, for me, is the takeout from this diagram. It's not an operating core. As a change manager, you can't change the business, right? A change person, not a change manager. You can't change the business. The business has to want to change itself, right? That's quite key. If the business doesn't want to change, you don't have line authority, you don't have hierarchical authority, you've only got influence authority. So you're sitting outside, you've got to get the strategic apex to want to change and start putting pressure on the support staff to help them build the capabilities to change. But recognizing where change sits as part of this technostructure is key, because I'll show you a slide later. If you polish up, if you get too purist in the technostructure, you'll see the project managers, they come up with a PMI and a PMBOK project plan that is a project plan from hell. Nobody can work. The process maps that the guys are intrinsically, fundamentally detailed, but nobody can follow those. You just don't understand it. So you can go down your own rabbit hole as a technocrat. You've got to make it fit for purpose, because you've got to enlist people into change. They've got to be able to read. They have to be able to embrace the change world. So recognize you've got a different mentality there as opposed to a mentality here that these guys are trying to earn money and trying to drive the business, be easy to do business with, and recognize that because you sit separately, you can actually become quite enclosed in your own sort of operating world, in your boardroom, in your change management meetings, and become very purist and lose sight of what's happening in the business. So for me, that's a really important diagram and a framework, a framework, to Charles, that sits in the back of your head. Simplified view of the business. What are you setting out to do? Let's just keep change in context. What is that operating core setting out to do? And the short answer is do more with less. That's pretty much the profit mantra for a business. We're trying to do more with less. And if you hold that in mind, with any conversation you're having around change, these guys, why are we changing? We're implementing SAP, we're changing the HRIS system, we are shutting down offices, we are opening new countries. I want to do more with less. Put less inputs in, get more inputs out. It's a productivity ratio, input-output ratio per se. So my business objectives, I've got to have the capabilities to meet those objectives. I'm building capability to meet my business objective. And my process enablers enable the process to have the capabilities. Again, with change, the only thing you can change in most practical terms is the enablers. You can't really change any of that because, business objectives don't really exist. Right, it's a language, it's a verbal. This is what we want to achieve, right? It doesn't exist. Whereas a business enabler is a person, it's a table, it's a truck, it's a machine. You can touch it, you can feel it, right? In that sense, so you can change your enablers. And if you're making a cake, you're baking at home, you've got your ingredients, and you're turning that into a cake, and the cake's got to be nice. So my business objective is to have a nice cake. I make the cake, but I use my ingredients to do it, and my ingredients are these sort of enablers. So when you're changing an organization, when you're looking to drive change, think about which enablers you're trying to move and what is the relationship between those enablers. Because people in the organization will talk about we have to have this capability. We're building capability, we transforming our capabilities, we're stretching for our objectives. But really to get there, at practical terms, it's your enablers. What enablers do I need, and what is the profile of those enablers? So what should my people or my staff profile look like in order to make sure my capabilities will exist? And The reason I harp on this point is just to separate the language, because often change is quite difficult because of an English problem. The English gets in your way in terms of what you're trying to do. Just separate your English down to, well, we're just trying to change this because it'll give us that. So we're not changing capabilities. I'm changing a person, and the consequence of that profile change for that staff member was that we'll have more capabilities. They weren't trained before, now they are trained. Therefore, we're capable of doing X. Does that all make sense? This sort of scene setting. If anybody disagrees, shout. Alrighty, let's push on. We've got a lot to get through. I love this one from Stephen Covey. I'm not sure this is what he meant when he said it, but it's most certainly what I take out of it. Right. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. That's quite key when it comes to change management. That comma is important. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. I'm going to come back to that. I've got a 5-point change management model. Part 1, understand the dynamics of change. So seek first to understand, then to be understood. So let me understand the organization. Once I understand the organization, independently of whether or not I'm changing, the organization is changing. This is a key point. This step 1 is independent of change. Most likely you're only going to do the step when you're about to change. I acknowledge that. But that's coincidence. Right? Understand the organization, understand the leadership, understand the culture, understand how we operate. Then you can say, okay, well, where do we want to be? What's our flag on the hill? Right? Define the new business model. That's our strategy that we spoke about, the macro strategy. Build a detailed plan, and then you go into execution. Seek first to understand, which is really 1, 2, and 3, and then to be understood, which is number 4. It's now making sure the organization comes along with the new objectives and the plan, and you're getting people engaged. So 1, 2, and 3 do tend to work together, because as you're defining the context, you're learning, and as you're building plans, you're learning and understanding about the organization. It is a little bit iterative. But point number 1 is not specifically to change, but as a change manager, you'll understand the organization no matter what as best you can, as much as your client will give you scope to have that understanding. Quite frankly, they often don't give you the time, the budget to do that understanding properly, but we're working at a purist level here. So let me jump into these 5 points through the next 20 minutes, and then we'll wrap it and go to questions. So understanding. Because understanding is so big, I'm just going to talk about some business models and concepts. What Charles said, frameworks. I'm glad you said that, Charles. So I'm going to hit that on the head specifically. Hey, good day, Matt. Welcome. And we've just jumped in. We're just talking through how to understand an organization. We can talk about how to understand it, so you've arrived at a good time, and then we'll talk about change strategy, change plans, and that sort of thing. Right. So to understand an organization, I'll take you through a series of models. Just briefly, you need to take the models and apply them in your own business. Strategic models will come slightly later, but not just Daniel will get there. Key point of the understanding is you only get answers to the questions you ask, right? Don't ever forget that. Have you asked a question? Have you gone out to actually find out what it is you need to know, right? It's human life. It's not more than that, right? Another point, and I was told this 30 years ago. I'm dating myself, but it's really important. If enough people believe in it, then it is true, even if it is factually incorrect. That whole idea about perception is reality, right? If people believe in it, they will behave as if it exists and it's true. Even if you can prove categorically it does not exist, it is wrong. People believe it, they'll talk about it, they'll repeat it, it becomes folklore and mantra in the business. And so if you find this, if people are repeating it, you can record it as a finding. You can say, this is how I understand the business, even though you know it's not correct, because people behave to it. And maybe you're trying to change behavior, so for them it's real. So you accept that and you work with that. So as a framework, hypothesis-driven analysis, I find this a particularly useful mindset, and how you use it will change session by or project by project or conversation by conversation. But the point is, for an hypothesis-driven analysis, you have a key question, and because you're in understanding, we say, is the organization ready for change? We're seeking to understand, are we ready for change? And there, what we do is say, we have a series of hypotheses that sit underneath. And hypothesis is a unsubstantiated conclusion, right? So I'm going to conclude something, and then I'm going to go out and prove whether my conclusion was correct or incorrect, right? That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to say, well, I've through maybe some initial conversations, I've been told that common vision and end game is established. You know, the CFO, the CEOs called me in and said, yeah, we've got all that. All right. Well, let's just validate that. So key question, can the vision be repeated by employees? Go and ask a bunch of employees. Well, no. Well, yeah, they might have established it, but nobody knows about it, therefore it's not established, right? You know, you can go back and say, well, it's a great secret. Does the vision align to the high leverage factors of the things you can pull in the business, the factors of production, the factors of change? Is there alignment there? Is the vision inspiring, accepted by the employees? They can repeat it, but they reject it. They think it's rubbish, or it's pie in the sky, or it's threatening. They're not prepared to buy in, come back to that enlistment. So then you could argue whether it is or isn't established. The key business drivers are identified. You know, what internal, external factors are impacting the current business or will impact the business in the future? Do I understand the business drivers? Do I think that answer is complete? So the point, without going through the whole framework too much, is take your hypotheses and say, what do I need to know? What would, if the organization was ready for change, these things would be in place. Let me go and check through questioning whether they're in place or not. Now, you can find these answers out through workshops, through interviews, through surveys, you know, any of the engagement techniques. And the issues surfaced by these example questions should be addressed before the organization can be ready for change. So if you can't say, yes, the common vision is established because people know it and they've competed and they've bought into it, you know, then you've got some more work to do before you should go forward with that. So hypothesis-driven analysis, state your hypotheses and then prove them positive or false, or true or false. You know, ownership of critical actions is assigned. And when you say assigned, has the management who it's been assigned to, have they adopted and said, yes, I accept that ownership and I've got time and I can make it happen? Or yeah, I've got it, but I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't have time for that, but they told me to do it, so I'll get around to it when I can. So again, then you're not ready for change. Understand the ratios. What are you changing? This is a key point. If a change initiative does not directly or indirectly move a ratio, then it's reasonable to question the merits of the change. Think about that. A business, the scorecard for a business is its financials. So you've got your balance sheet, you've got your profit and loss, you've got your ratios. What are you moving, right? And is there a relationship? How are you going to measure that change, right? Have they tied the change to a ratio, a productivity ratio, a financial ratio, a profitability ratio, liquidity? What are you trying to do? And are you changing the big number? Are you changing the top number, the bottom number, the numerator, the denominator, or both? Which numbers are you changing? And ask them why do we want to change? What should that number be? Right? That's a great question to help the organization and get their mind tied back to find the ratio or ratios that they are changing, and just make sure there's clarity on that. Otherwise, you're changing the organization almost independently of the financials, and that's got different levels of success and engagement with the executives. Understand the risk profile. This goes pretty much without saying. You've got your business strategy, which the risk appetite will tie to your business strategy. Your risk strategy will tie to your business strategy. You'll have a risk strategy, an attitude, and a tolerance. Just understand risk. But the key question is, ask yourself, what is ambiguous? When it comes to change, what is the ambiguity that you're dealing with? Right. So we're implementing SAP. We are putting in an HRIS system. We are launching a new market. What is ambiguous? What don't we know? Because you'll sit down in a risk workshop and you'll write down a long list of risks and cause and consequence and impact and likelihoods and ratings and reds and greens and yellows, all good stuff. But if you then sit down and sort of say, well, what don't we know? What's ambiguous? And then you look at your risk, your table of risks, and say, if we answered all those risks, if we dealt with them, we completely treated them would that ambiguity be resolved? And most often it won't be. Most often that ambiguity sits there and we deal with risk over here. So When you get into a risk conversation, start saying, what's ambiguous? Because that's what you want to fix. Right? A lot of the other risks are fairly self-evident. People won't show up for meetings. We won't go live on time. We won't have enough budget. Yeah. But what's the ambiguity we're dealing with? It's a great sort of check question for the risk conversation. What is truly ambiguous in our project? Understanding leadership. I like the Bowman and Deal model. It's if there's a book, it's a fairly light read, but a very powerful read. Reframing Organizations, Artistry, Choice, and Leadership. And the principle is that a leader will see the world through one of the frames, a very symbolic frame, rituals and ceremonies, or very structural frame, people, process, and understand how the leadership sees the organization, and realize that if the leaders get stuck in one frame. Yeah, the warning is that if a leader continually sees the world through the same frame, they become ineffective, because depending on the conversation, depending on where you are in your change cycle, depending on whether it's a rah-rah speech or guys, this is real speech, it's a different frame that you're presenting to, and check with your leaders that they're understanding the importance of the different frames and they're moving between the frames, and everybody, me, you, we'll all have a dominant frame, and sort of say, okay, how does this person see the world? And maybe the senior executives, I know my work with the banks, the senior executives are particularly political at the very senior levels, but at a lower level, at a technical level, the subject matter experts, they're often quite structural. So they're having two different conversations. That's how it's going to be. They're going to arrive at two different frameworks in mind. And what happens is I ask you to think of the color blue, right? You all know what the color blue is. And I ask you to think of a ball. You know what a ball is? So think of a blue ball, right? We've got 7 people on this call. What's the chances all 7 of us thinking about the same blue ball? Well, none, right? So now you show up with a structural frame and a political frame, or a structural frame and an HR frame, where somebody's much more focused on the people, this is much more focused on the process. They're coming at the conversation with such a different frame of mind that they're almost impossible for them to have a overlapping conversation. They'll go away thinking they've heard two different things. So when it comes to leadership, understand the frames that the leaders are looking at. And leadership can be right through the depth of the organization, not only at the senior level. I like culture, coming back to frames. I like the Roger Harrison culture framework, but quite frankly, choose whichever framework you like. But if you want an analysis, a means to analyze the culture, understand it, look up the Roger Harrison one. It's a series of questions, and it'll tell you whether or not the organization is achievement-orientated, power, role, or support-orientated. And you can use that. Those cultures may change by function and hierarchy in the organization, by location, and that sort of thing. It's I ran this culture survey for a workshop I was doing over a weekend with a client, and they were all highly achievement orientated, and they all came out and said, yes, we like to work 20 hours a day and 7 days a week, 6 days a week. And basically I called rubbish. I said, no, that's just not true. I'm calling you out. And they really spent the rest of the weekend trying to prove to me it was true, and they couldn't function. They were so determined to be achievement operated, they became dysfunctional. It was fascinating, but perhaps another story. Understand the business processes frameworks. The APQC framework, if you don't know it, is a pretty good framework. Again, you'll find that online. There's a standard framework. You download it. It'll give you levels 1, 2, 3. Yeah, levels 1, 2, and 3. And it'll tell you which processes hang together with which ones. It'll give you your structure. And then you go and map your level 4 process. So that's a pretty good starter pack for one. And then the free version will give you all of that, and then you can get industry versions that you've got to pay for. I've managed to work across many industries using the free version, because you start to then customize it to your customer specific needs anyway. But if you want to understand processes, that's a pretty good way to understand the organization. The SWOT analysis, the great SWOT analysis. Now, there's 2 ways to do SWOT analysis. The traditional way, and I will be polite in this one. Here's your SWOT: strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat, the same thing. But my recommendation is align it to your value chain, your end-to-end process, whatever your high-level process is that you're looking at, and then start to map your SWOT out. Because when you take your standard 2x2 matrix and you fill in all the strengths over here and the weaknesses here, and you've got information, all the boxes, often that language is, is motherhood statements. It lacks context, and it's repeated in many different ways. But when you start to fill it out and say, for inbound logistics, what is my strength? Now I have to write a strength that is specific to inbound logistics. The language tightens up quite considerably. And then you find out, okay, well, I can do that, but I can't think of any strengths in service. I'm actually, but if we had written 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 strengths into a 2x2 matrix, it would look like a really full strength analysis. But when you take those out and you spell it across, you find out you didn't actually write anything down for service. So I'm quite sure an organization's got strengths for service. So this framework helps you make sure you've actually thought through everything you're looking at. And here we've overbaked sales and marketing, so it's looking pretty good. There's a lot of opportunities, don't have a lot of weaknesses, threats are low. So you could say almost that's what we do well. We dominate in this. This is what we can say is our core business. Whereas we look over here, we've got some strengths, a bunch of weaknesses, loads of threats coming at us, and we can't see any opportunities. We've got a lot of exposure here. We need to see the world differently. We need to take control of our inbound logistics. And that might be a case of outsourcing your operations inbound logistics and saying, we're going to become a sales and marketing company. We're going to change our core business to sales and marketing, outbound logistics, sales and marketing, because we've got core business here. There's a lot of potential in this one. We've got a lot of weakness here. So why are we doing it? This is not our game. We don't understand this part of it. Let's go and get somebody else to make it, and we will buy it. We will sell it instead, because we clearly know what we do in sales and we clearly don't know what we do in operations. So let's try and not be all things to all people. So this framework is probably the most powerful framework you can use to do a good SWOT analysis. Stakeholders, I'll draw a breath shortly. I need to move on. The nature of the stakeholder relationship. You've got different types of power. You've got legitimate power, you've got expert power, you've got referral power, you've got political power. Understand your power bases, and then understand the which power belongs to which stakeholder. And then you've got the nature of interest, the financial, operational, reputational, self-interest. Because a legitimate power, this is hierarchy of power, it's an executive. Initially, they will have financial interest in the project, right? Their bonuses are tied to it, the balance sheet, the stock market's tied to the financials. So they want to the project is going to go well, the project is healthy. As that project is experiencing difficulties, their interest is going to start to change to operational. And if it gets really bad, it's going to become, well, we've got to really manage the company's reputation in the marketplace. That is quite key to your communications and how you're talking to them, right? The way you start engaging with them and holding their attention is by understanding where their nature of interest is, and that's how it's changing as the project is going through its own maturity cycles. And so the executive, they've got an interest in the financials, whereas an expert, a subject matter expert, has probably got a primary interest in the operational side of it. So one communications, one shoe does not fit all. Understand the power, understand the stakeholder, and if their power base is the subject matter expert, they're expert power, right? The way they engage with the project and the interest they have in the project is different, right? From each other. Pushing on, I think we're coming to you. I've got two more. Understanding the employee motivation. You've got can, can't, will, won't. Will, won't is your attitude, right? And how they're engaging. Technical skills is can, can't, but you've got this ladder from awareness, objection, understanding, acceptance, it's sort of a change ladder, but depending on where you are on the project, whether they think they're going to lose their job or lose their expertise. I mean, Hollywood actors all just went on strike for, 3 months because they said that we're going to lose our expertise because the AI is just going to replace us. So, they just shut down Hollywood. It effectively was exactly those first 2 points. And as they sorted that out, they went through it. So understand your employee motivation. This will, won't, can, can't framework is a pretty good one. And the accountability framework, you've got the philosophy of work on the project or in the project. Sorry, on the process or in the process. If you're working in the process, your traditional RACI it's reasonable. But if you're working on the process, redefine RACI. RACI then becomes, what are you accountable for? Now, you can't be accountable for being accountable, right? So if you're accountable for being informed, the organization is saying to you, we expect you to be informed. We expect you to go and find out what's going on, make yourself informed on the progress of the project and how it impacts your business, right? If you consulted, we hold you accountable for contributing, for being consulted, for saying something intelligent, for preparing for the meetings and bringing a reasonable position that represents your part of the business to the meeting. The same is for approve. If that was accountable, you can't be accountable for being accountable. So change the A to approve, right? Now you say, who's approving this, right? Who's my approval matrix? That actually changes things up quite dramatically by saying, when I'm working on the process, right, who starts to be approving things and who's responsible. So change your RACI for on the process from accountable to approve, and it'll actually unlock a whole bunch of conversations. And quite frankly, you could spend weeks having this conversation with executives, because now you're starting to say you're accountable. They say, no, I'm not. I don't accept. Then you find out where your pain problems are in your change process. Writing up your issues, you can use this sort of thing. You've got adequacy. Are we adequacy of rigor? How well is it under control? Yeah, we look. It's got we on top of it. We understand it. Take a watch and brief. Leadership effectiveness. It's a high. Leaders are very high. A lot of adequacy. Low priority. We don't have to. It's not a burning platform. Down the bottom here, low burning platform. Just a simple matrix for impact. Matrix for working out where your burning issues are coming out of your hypothesis analysis. What do we have to fix before we get into change? You write up those issues. You can draw a conclusion from many issues. You can't draw a conclusion from one issue. You need at least two issues to give you a conclusion, right? So many issues give you a conclusion. I can conclude because of that and that, or that and that, I can conclude this. Right, and from many conclusions, I can draw a recommendation. So it's many to one. It's not one to one. You can't conclude something from one issue, from one single finding, because is that finding valid or invalid? But once you've got a few issues, you can say those issues coming out of my hypothesis-based analysis allows me to draw these conclusions. From these conclusions, I'll make that recommendation. Alrighty, that ends the frameworks piece, and I'm well over time, so I'll move a little bit quicker. Step 2 in the change framework is understand the business strategy. I like this diagram. Remember we said do more with less, right? That's the organization's mantra, to do more with less. So right now, the organization is competing in the market to have that level of differentiation, and it's costing them this much money, the cost of production, right? So the more you differentiate, typically the more expensive it gets. But mass production is cheap. Single production is expensive. What are we trying to do with the change process? Are you trying to keep the same level of differentiation but make it cheaper? Do more with less? Is it a productivity initiative? Are we trying to perhaps become more differentiated but still make it cheaper? Or go to maybe a mass production, with no differentiation, make it very cheap. What are they actually trying to do? So have that as a language, have that as a framework, have that in your language that you can talk to your stakeholders. Let's understand, because then you're talking the language of business and putting the change in context for the business. So as you're trying to reduce the cost of production, effectively what you're trying to do is improve productivity, make the organization more productive. So the capabilities, what capabilities do we have to put in place to make sure we can be more productive, get a higher output of the same input? right? So what are we trying to change? Remember, this is strategic, big picture, macro strategy. So if you think about it, how do you sell in the market, right? What are we selling? Say a tailor-made product, which is a highly customized product, but still on price. There's still a price relationship to it. Now you probably buy one of these products, at least once a month. It's called the local hamburger shop. Whether you go into the hamburger and they say, well, what type of bread do you want? Do you want tomato sauce with that? Do you want onions? Do you want cheese with that? They're giving you a tailor-made product, right? It's a customized product, but you're not prepared to pay very much for it because it's a hamburger nevertheless. So, there's only so much you'll pay for a hamburger. Right. So how are you selling? How's the organization selling? Are we selling a commodity product, a quality product, tailor-made, that sort of stuff? And therefore, how do we have to make it? Now, you could argue that mass customization, right, that's treating the hamburger, we're mass customizing it. Every customer that walks in wants something different. Therefore, it's mass customization. The process must be a dynamic process, for a dynamic product of a stable process, right? So that tailor-made would lead to mass customization. Commodity would talk to mass production. That's sensible to think like that. But from a change point of view, if you can break the dynamic between how you are presenting yourself in the marketplace and how you're making it, and you can say, of these 4 points, how much of it can we push into mass production? How much can we make a commodity process out of it? So we don't have the whole process is unique. We only have the front end the customer sees and the back end that the customer sees. That is unique to the customer. Everything else in the middle is mass produced. Right. That now allows you to get to this point here of improving productivity without losing differentiation. Right. So separate how you talk about your products in the market to how you make them. That's the message there. There's in the sessions to come, in the weeks to come, I'm going to dive into this model in quite some depth. So we'll leave it there. And therefore, work out your people, process, technology relationship per capability requirement, right? What does it mean if we are mass producing things? So in the factory, what does mass production mean from a people point of view? So now from my enabler point of view, what must my people be capable of? What is my profile of the people I need to be working in mass production versus the profile of the people I need to be working in mass customization? Understand that separation, because they're not the same thing. You need different types of people, and your manager-worker relationship is different between mass production, mass customization, or continuous improvement. This is a non-thinking worker. This is a thinking worker, quite frankly. Right? Continuous improvement, constantly looking to improve the line, make things better, make the service and the process better. These guys show up to work and they get paid minimum wage, and you do what you can, and they go. So different profiles. Keep that in mind. Okay. And depending on what you're trying to achieve, you're now looking at either using the old language, radical transformation, incremental or radical. So it gives you an idea of the scale of change that you're getting yourselves into, depending on what you're trying to do in the organization. How big is the change? And incremental can still be fairly substantial, just less than radical. So this is your macro strategy. Remember we said we had a macro strategy. Now you've got to drop it into a detailed plan. So you're going to do a whole bunch of things. Now, this is probably one of the more important bits of this session, so stick with me here. You've got to do a whole bunch of things. So we're going to implement a CRM system. Cool. And once you've implemented CRM, all the customer problems will be solved. So that's lucky. Right. We'll just do that then. The reality is you've got to ask yourself, if I do something, what will I get? What will I get if I do implement a CRM system? What benefit or value will I receive? If I implement a CRM system, I'll have a database of names, pretty much customer names. I might have some transactional history, but I haven't solved any problems. So I've done something. I've got an intermediate outcome. To get to my end game, to be successful, I have to do something else, right? So I take that outcome, I add an initiative to it, so that plus that gives me a new outcome. And if I add another one, I'll finally get to my end game. I'm starting to build up a business outcome management roadmap. Database of names is created. I now train some staff. train staff using a better database will give me improved sales productivity, right? But have I achieved my end game? Chances are not. What about the ideas of risk, warehousing, people and culture, human resources, finance, marketing? How does that impact on that rolling out the CRM and the end game you're trying to build in? So the framework says build up a map that has your initiatives. Your initiatives are tied to an outcome. The outcome and another initiative will give you a further outcome. And you build up this map, which could look as busy as that. Right? It's not important to read it, just to get the principle. That is now a detailed plan that says, what do I have to do? And you change your thinking from saying, I'm not focusing on what I'm doing, I'm focusing on what I'm getting. I'm focusing on the outcome. So if somebody says that review and agree risk to the project, well, that's done. Well, is the risk profile understood? Well, not really. But we've done this review and agree. We sat in a room, we've done it. But it's not understood. Therefore, the activity is not done unless the outcome is achieved. Unless you can demonstrably prove that the outcome is done, is complete, is there, then the initiative is not done. Doesn't matter what they say, it's irrelevant, it is not done. And if somebody says, well, we've done this, or we're not going to do this, we're not going to induct work package resources into a project approach, or we're not going to do that anymore. And what they are not really appreciating is that will contribute to that, which will contribute to that. So the change management program is aligned to the risk profile. They've now just pulled the rug out of an outcome it's further down the chain, right? They're not able to tell that by choosing not to do this piece of work, there's a ripple effect that's maybe out of sight, a couple of steps away. So before you allow people to just walk away from activities, make sure they understand the chain of that activity as well. So this business outcome roadmap is a good framework for putting the chains together, putting the outcomes and the project approaches together. These islands, in this example, that's business planning, this is change management, and that could be technology, it could be HR, it could be legal, it could be risk. You build these islands where it's all sort of the same sort of activities that are clustered together. And eventually in the middle, you've got your end game. And if we do all of that, then our customer problems are solved. At the end, it's a much bigger piece of work. Brings us to point number 4. How do we go from where we are? Now we've got a plan. Now we want to execute. The business has to want to change. Remember, you're as a change manager, you get in the business to want to change. That's your job, right? Your job is not to really affect change. Your job is to get the business to want to change. If they want to change, they will change with or without you. If they don't want to change, they will also not change with or without you. So your job is to get the business to want to change. Change is doing things differently. There's a change in behavior. This is not technology change. This is behavioral change. Getting people to behave differently. So understand what behaviors you need, how the behavior has to change, right? So don't just write down what's going to be different, these capabilities, we're going to do this with this. How does behavior change? What behavior is different? Show me how you measure and I'll tell you how you behave. Measurement drives behavior, whether we like it or not. You're driving down the highway, you're doing 115, 118 kilometers an hour, you see the policeman with the speed gun, comment, the first thing you do is hit the brakes, right? There's the measurement, your behavior changes in a flash, right? Measurement drives behavior, right? So if you do not change your measures, but you're asking everybody to change the behavior, but you haven't changed your KPIs, they've been measured one way, and you're asking them to behave in a different way. You've got complexity there, right? So look at your measures and say, are my measures supporting the behavior I want to see, right? It's not a big stick that only measures, only drive change with measures, but measures and behavior are closely aligned. And this one's just a fun one. Rumor equals ambiguity times interest. Once you get into a change program, rumors are going to be rife. Ambiguity is high, interest is high. Control the ambiguity. You can't really control the interest that much, but your ambiguity you can. If you want to knock over interest because rumor will cripple your project, help your project, whatever, you can deal with your ambiguity. That's, under your change program, your comms, the way you're messaging, getting the right message in the right language, dealing with the ambiguity out there. Set up your your change management function. So you've got that structure we spoke about, strategic apex, your senior leadership, the change role is leadership and approval, they're in the steering committee, and what are their drivers? So understand this sort of how do you translate that schematic into your change committees, your change governance, and have it in the right place. And as I say, frequently the biggest challenge to success is that the technostructure adopts a purist approach and develops solutions that are not practical by the business, which means the business bounces off. They're not resistant to change, they just don't understand what you're talking about. That process map is gobbledygook. It makes no sense to me. Give me something I can use, right? And align and understand where you're going to fit in and the different drivers. Your various committees, I'll push through this. But each company will have their own. This is an important schematic for me. You have a good change committee. You've got your steering committee. You've got your working committee. The working committee is your change management engine. It's got to work closely with day-to-day operations. So day-to-day operation comes into the working committee and discusses change. There'll be project teams that are bringing up reporting and activities to the working committee. But the working committee and the day-to-day operations are the same people, but two different agendas. But the day-to-day operations, they've got to be accountable for the benefit sign-off. They've got to say whether or not the changes happened. Because often the working committee or steering committee will say, okay, we went live, it's great, we're good. No, there's no issues, all is done. But the business says, no, that's not working. I can't function. So the business has to sign it off and have that little engine working well. And you've got the skills transfer coming through from operations comes into the project, into the change. They may give staff to help on the project teams, map processes, or do some understanding within the change program. So use this as the skills engine, the skills upgrading, and then you've got your operational scorecards, workshops, data, training, education. But see it in that language. Often that you see these committees exist, but this sort of dynamic relationship between the committee and operations doesn't stay front of mind. That you sort of trying to blend business as usual with change management. And then the program office sits separately. And the program office is, getting and doing this sort of things, validates the health of organizational change and make sure that there's symmetry and cohesion between the projects. This is my opinion of the program office. And quite often the program office starts to become the working committee. These two blend and you lose that separation of language, right? The program office should sit separately and just make sure this dynamic is working in a healthy manner. Seek first to be understood. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. So we're going into delivery, understanding, bit of comms. What you heard is not what I said, and what I said is not what I want, and what I want is not what I need. Right? Just be clear on your comms. Understand what you want. I want you to do what I meant, not what I said. Classic issues with comms. We're talking about blue balls, but what's a blue ball? Right? Be very clear. Assumption is the enemy in comms. Have a regular cadence. Get people used to seeing your comms. The first thing is get your comms blessed. Make sure that the senior leaders know about it. Then your middle leaders, then your rest of your line management. So you might have a monthly calendar where there's a standard cadence. Stick to your cadence. Often people say, well, I don't know. We didn't really have anything to say, so we didn't bother saying anything, right? But what you're doing is, while you don't have anything to say, you're building up a habit that people know the comms is coming, and talk to them, right? So be training people to see the comms as well. Education versus training. This is the will won't. Would you prefer a chauffeur with advanced driver education or advanced driver training? Right? Now that's the difference between education and training. Right? Would you want a pilot that has been educated or a pilot that's been trained? Right? They're different things. And your education is part of this attitudinal side, the will won't. That's when you're educating people, you're communicating them, you're engaging with them, you're educating them. Training is can't. Right? So as you're engaging with staff, say, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to fix their head, I'm trying to fix their skills. And you're trying to move people into this top will and can bucket. People that can't and won't, you may actually eventually need to reallocate them to other duties or career opportunities. The will and can't, well, I can train them, and the won't and I can. Okay, well, that's motivation, that's mentoring, that's a bit of counseling. You can move them, right? So understand where your people are, but remember, your comms is all about attitude and getting people to enlist themselves. Your comms is sustained inducement to enlist themselves in the change program, right? Get themselves to, I will do this. I can't, but I will. And then I can train, you'll train me, and then I'll be great, right? So ready, I'll come back to that last slide, but readiness, readiness to go live, basically are your outcomes achieved? If you've used this map, if you can tick your outcomes, you're ready to go live. That's in my world, the methodology coming through. Learn your organization from a 0.5. You can't train an organization. You can't teach an organization. That's impossible because organizations don't exist, right? They are a certificate on the wall that says that we're incorporated in Sydney on this day. That's about the closest you can actually see an organization. What an organization is a group of people that come together to work for a common good in a common manner for a common objective. So you're training the people, you're training the staff, right? That's who you train. You're training individuals, but you want to aggregate that knowledge up. So you've got to have your working committees and working groups. You come back to this sort of structure where these are your working groups, your committees. So you're trying to change it. You're training at the individual level, but you're trying to have institutionalized understanding across many people. It comes in here, your committees and working groups, your external references. You can go to your Chartered Accountants Association, Legal Association, your Business Transformation Association. They know this. They know what they're talking about. The key one is operational variance management. That's a really important one. Plan actual variance, right? A business sets out to do something. It wants to make 10. It made 8. Is a variance of 2. Right? Why is there a variance of 2? Right? This is your scorecards again. What are you doing about that variance? Why did we have that variance? What went wrong? That's your training loop. If your training is going well, if the organization is learning, your variances are probably being managed and getting smaller. If the organization can't fix their variance, go back to your training. So part of your learning organization is how you deal with variance management and bring the operational gaps into the training world. But remember, you're training individuals, not organizations. Often that gets forgotten. So in closing, losing your 20 minutes, compelling them to enlist themselves. This is, you are trying to drive, and Matt, you missed this at the start, but we spoke about this being the definition of change management. A macro change strategy, we saw that. A detailed plan, business outcome management, we saw that. Delivers sustained inducement to staff, compelling them to enlist themselves and participate. As your change manager, this is what you're doing. This is your comms. This is your pushing. This is your education. Will, won't, can, can't. Compelling them to enlist themselves. Understand where they are. Understand how leadership impacts them. Understand how the organization culture impacts them, and get staff to enlist themselves.